It's Wednesday, and that means it's Brap time. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Brap. Let me adjust my mic settings here real quick. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't want to be yelling in everyone's ears. So, yeah, welcome back, everyone. It's Wednesday, and happy to be back. We have a special guest with us, first-time guest, actually. And I think the Brap guys are going to be joining us, I hope. So I'm sure they'll be joining at some point this evening. But anyhow, let me introduce this first time guest. We have a former Ubisoft game developer. We have he's known on the Twitters as Agent Deli. Deli, what's up, man? Welcome to Brap.
Hello. Welcome to Brap, everybody. Welcome to Brap. I'm glad that the rest of the panels. I'm kidding. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate that.
No,
We've
absolutely.
traded mutually on the internet for quite some time, but it's very, very nice to formally speak to you and formally meet you.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Like I've heard you on numerous other shows, so I was like, you know what? I need to get Agent Deli on and talk some video games with him and, kind of pick his brain a little bit about, game development, things like that. So, also big shout out to everyone in the live chat. What's up, everyone? I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Please retweet. If you're new to the show, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button as well. Definitely appreciate the support as always. So, we do have a couple topics we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to discuss Halo Infinite. Can 343 turn the tables? Save Halo Infinite. We're going to talk about Ubisoft, who might purchase them, and then some media anger over PlayStation's game trials that are behind their platinum tier. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I do want to go to Deli about something in particular, because this is a conversation, Deli, that we have seen quite a bit since its inception. What, 5 years ago now at this point, I think? Has it been 5 years?
I think it's been 6. I think 2016 was the first year.
Okay, so and what we're referring to is Xbox Game Pass. And I think it's fair to have a conversation, I think, about sustainability, things like that, especially when you hear individuals like Sean Layden and, God, I always forget the name of the head or CEO of whatever of is it or Take Two? Is it Take Two? Is it Czar something? I forget his name. It's commentary on releasing big AAA titles or their big games day and date doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who has insight into the industry more so than I do, because you worked in the industry. This is why I love having industry guests on, because you all provide a certain insight that a lot of us don't have. And like one of my biggest pet peeves, Deli, is that there's podcasts out there that speak in ways that, or speak about certain things without prefacing maybe that this is how I think it might work, or this is my opinion. You hear them say things that are just not correct. And I only know that because I tend to talk to individuals who are either in the industry as journalists or developers. And I kind of run these things by them, and you'd be surprised that there is some misinformation that that's perpetuated, I think, unfortunately, by certain podcasts and stuff. And that's not to say that one side, somebody's going, oh, the other side does it too. No, it's saying, generally speaking, that tends to happen. So, but anyhow, so yeah, you have a unique view on the situation of or Game Pass, because you worked in the gaming industry. I've heard some developers say some positive things about Game Pass. I've heard some developers maybe seemingly on the fence about Game Pass. They're not sure how this is going to play out. They're not sure how they fit long term in that kind of model. Whether a situation arises where certain games maybe do better than other games in that model. I think those are fair questions to ask. I don't think Game Pass is the death of the industry. I do think, though, that it's going to be an addition to, because I do think that there are, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? there's a variety of demographics, I think, in gaming, and when I mean consumer demographics, that have different wants, that are motivated by different things, that have different ideas of what value is, and that isn't any different than any other consumer product. And I think that for whatever reason, the gaming community often forgets that. I don't know why they treat gaming differently than other consumer products. It blows my mind. But that's also why I think we have these different business models. So I think Game Pass will be an addition to what we see now. But I'm just rambling on, Deli. But I'm sorry. But I promise I do want to get your thought on this. So, so what are your thoughts on Game Pass as somebody who's worked in the industry?
I mean, I have a bunch of thoughts. I mean, I guess I should preface this. Are you asking me as a consumer with a developer background, or are you asking me as a developer with a consumer background?
Developers with a consumer background.
Okay. As a developer, I am hesitant on Game Pass just for the fact that we are in an area, or just in an era of gaming where it's still currently in its infancy, which is very hard for, I guess, consumers to wrap their brain around, because we are at a moment where we have just hit massive global appeal just within the last decade. So if you look at something like movies and music, streaming wise and everything like that, I mean, those services and just those industries in general have been pretty popular over the course of, uh, um, what's it called? Over the course of a few decades. And then you'll see a huge spike where it suddenly becomes things like exports for the US, or it becomes international. Um, then we start to see a lot of collaborations and stuff like that. We have not hit that point yet in gaming where it is massive global appeal. It is at every corner of the world. Um, we have not reached that yet. And the reason why I say that is because I spoke to Phil Spencer. So I work at Microsoft I used to work at Ubisoft, now work at Microsoft. But I spoke to Phil Spencer on 1 week, which is a thing at Microsoft where it's like a hackathon, and it's like all of the employees, well, I guess all of the employees that want to go, meet up for 1 week. The event is also called 1 week, Microsoft 1 week, so I'll just call it the event. So the event is basically this on foot thing where if you basically can hold up a sign, or there's a bunch of people around with tents and stuff that say, hey, this is what we want to work on. And actually the Xbox adaptive controller came out of that. It was at the hackathon. It was codename Project Zephyrus. And but yeah, so anyways, regardless, so I spoke to Phil Spencer to ask him a bunch of questions about it, because as a developer, my concerns are, do we actually get paid? Because as indie developers, there's a total different bunch of hoops that we have to jump through. So there's a bunch of payment plans for indie developers, whether it be pay per player, whether it be hours, whether it be, internal monetization systems, whether it be bulk money, bulk fee up front, where, I take $1 million and then that's it. There's a bunch of different, like 3 or 4 different monetary systems at play that Game Pass offers to developers. But in specifically, because I come from the AAA space, I am worried that the publisher will end up taking all of the money, and we won't get any of the rollover, despite it basically being our products that we work blood, sweat, and tears for. So he basically said that it's sustainable, but the goal isn't for it to be sustainable. The goal is to be able to give players the ability to play, because when we play, when people play, we all win. And as for the industry, not for Microsoft in general, but just for the industry, the more people. And we've been seeing that over the last decade, where it's been trending upward and upward mainstream wise, to the point that it's engulfing multiple industries revenue wise, year on year, which is very, very impressive. But so I asked him, I was like, so what's next on the horizon? And he basically said that he is currently looking to be hand in hand and foster the competitors that will run the industry in the next 20 or 30 years. Whether or not those pillars are the same pillars that have basically kept up the flame of the industry in these last 10 or 20 years of our small, very small industry, or it's going to be new up and coming risers. But right now, what we need is we need to be able to garner more appeal. We need to garner more people because there's this old school way of thinking that is basically a lot of companies. You'll see a lot of companies like Rockstar. You'll see a lot of companies like EA that and Ubisoft as well that basically operate in this old school mentality that if we have 200 million consoles out there, that basically is 200 million sales, essentially, the outreach. Well, that mentality for Phil Spencer is different because for him, he sees that as 200 million potential customers and rising, not just solely 200 million console sales, PC sales, game sales, right? That's
Hmm.
200 million foundation. And then on top of that. So, Game Pass as a developer, I'm very contentious about because we see stories all the time like with the Undead Labs CEO founder, him and his wife took I think they were bought for $20 million, and they ended up running away with 18 and then giving 2 million to the rest of um the studio head or the studio leads or whatever, the new ones, and then they kind of delegated that as seen fit. So that is a lot of the problem with putting AAA games on Game Pass, is because let's say I work for Square Enix or something like that. Square Enix takes this great publishing deal, but behind closed doors, I have never seen an ounce of that money trickle down because, I get paid salary, I work for this company, this development studio, and then I've already got paid for my deal. Square Enix takes away with the 20, 30, 40 million or whatever, right? So that's really where the concern is now. Um, of course, there's other concerns with indie game developers as well too, because you always hear that indie games are thriving, but if that's true, then every indie game on Game Pass would be making money, and that is actually not the case. It's a very selective few, which a lot of the indie games that are making money on Game Pass are actually Xbox Insider, Xbox or ID at Xbox um, studios or developers. So that's an entirely different can of worms. But as for the AAA space, it's very it's very dicey. But again, it's one of those things that it's not meant to be sustainable for now. It's meant to get people the ability to play, give people the ability to play. Because it doesn't matter if you or me play 2 hours of a game. That's 2 hours of a game that I potentially would not have checked out if I didn't have Game Pass. Oh, or that's 2 hours of play, and then I go, I really like BioWare, so I'm gonna
Hmm.
go back and I'm gonna reinvest in BioWare, and that basically is targeting the high end user, right? So Game Pass is really for much like the people who Phil Spencer took this analogy for me, and he basically said, the people who spend money on Game Pass are much like people who go out and buy the newest graphics cards, right? As game developers, don't make games for the people who have 3090s. You make games for people with the 3-year-old laptops or the console, right? I said yes, and he said, but you know that the experience on the 3090 is essentially vastly different than that on a laptop. But that consumer who goes out and buys a 3090 will always come back, will usually always spend money in the same ecosystem. So that's the target that we have here. And and a lot of the graphs that are shown at the GDC stuff back that claim, is that you'll see, consumers spend more, and you'll see consumers come back more. You'll see like 15% more engagement. You'll see monthly average users on the rise. And that's really where he's targeting. Everybody else who buys Game Pass and treats it like a gym membership, that's just a bonus, right?
I'm the guy that treats it like a gym membership, by the way.
And that's a bonus to him, but that's not the target audience. that Phil Spencer's looking for. So, yeah, I think Game Pass is good, but at the same time, I'm gonna have to give it another 2 or 3 years before I'm really, really sold on it. I'm very hesitant as a
Hmm.
developer
Okay.
on it, solely for the fact that my game
Mm.
is the game that I was credited in, Watch Dogs Legion, is on a subscription service, Ubisoft Plus, and I have yet to see a single residual. I have yet to see anything behind that. Um, so they can essentially sell
S-
that game out to Game Pass or PlayStation Now or a bunch of other subscription services, and that would not impact me at all. It
So,
would, yeah. Go ahead.
so I'm sorry. So question for you. Okay, so it sounds like this is gonna. This is okay This sounds like this is a great deal for the publishers, then, right?
It's a
Is
great deal for the publishers,
but
right?
but
Like
in terms of
you get,
developers, it's like okay, it's almost like hey, okay, so if a game, and this is what I'm trying to understand, if in the traditional model, right?
mhm.
If your game continues to sell, right? Let's say Jelly, you worked on Elden Ring, which would be amazing if you did or had. Um, and every time Elden Ring sells and it keeps selling, even 3, 4, 5 months out of the year, you're still seeing residuals from those sales, right, coming in, right?
For the
Is
publisher, but not for me as an individual developer. My job was to create assets and
okay,
do level design, so therefore I get paid a salary per year for that. So if I get
okay,
paid $100,000, which is a nice easy round number,
yeah,
over the course of 4 years of development time, so I got paid my $400,000 over the course of 4 years, and that's it for me. So
okay,
let's say this game sells 20 million copies 10 years down the road. I've already been paid for my job. I don't make any extra money.
okay. But isn't that the same? So I guess where I'm probably a little lost here. Um, I'm sorry, I'm not taking copious notes. um,
No, it's all good. Do your thing.
no, but I guess what I'm saying is, my understanding is, it almost sounds like the same thing in the traditional model that's happening in Game Pass. Am I understanding that correctly? Like it's almost the same issue though, right? Or is it not? Like
I'm
where
sorry, could you repeat that question?
yeah, it sounds like if you're saying the developer's not getting residual anyway from a traditional model, and the concern is that they're not going to get residual from the Game Pass model. That's the same thing though that's happening today, right? Already, or that was happening before Game Pass, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
I mean, it's essentially the same. Like, game developers aren't necessarily, we're not the most protected bunch. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
We're,
no, I
yeah,
get that. I guess what I'm trying to understand is if this is happening in the traditional model, and it's also happening in the Game Pass model, it sounds like it's not necessarily a Game Pass issue per se. This is an industry wide issue
yeah,
then.
it's an industry issue,
Yeah.
yes.
So
And the Game Pass is not supposed to be like the second coming of Christ that's supposed to come lift us out of the hole,
okay,
you know? It's
but
just it's another monetization system that is, again, reflective of the industry that I work in. So,
okay.
I don't get any extra bonuses.
So what? I guess what's and I'm not trying to minimize the concern here, Deli. I guess what I'm trying to ask too is what is the biggest concern then from developers or from your perspective as a developer with Game Pass then? Outside of, how do we get paid, things like that. What are some of the other, big concerns that people are because I one of the things that I've heard come up in my conversation is, you know, if there's a specific game that starts working in that model, are we then kind of shut out, right?
Yeah,
Um,
essentially that's the a lot of the concern because as a
yeah.
AAA game, as AAA, we see the indie titles do this. They take advantage of these deals that they're given. And mind you, each contract, each deal is completely independent from one another. So not every indie dev is going to get the same exact deal. But let's say a singular indie dev gets a bulk fee, right? $2 million, 18 months to finish the game. We'll do the marketing, bing bang boom, publish the game, when this deadline hits. Um, when you get a contract like that for a big AAA studio, the publisher now is essentially the investor group that would normally be controlling the publisher or normally be guiding the publisher. That investor group now is a large portion of that, monetary wise, has been expedited to the Game Pass model. So now imagine Microsoft or Game Pass being another investor on the board, right? But instead of one, they own six of them, right? So now game developers like EA and even smaller, third party publishers, Square Enix, are now targeting this kind of ease of access where it's a certain kind of game that is used to kind of churn and play the system, right? I mean, look at Outriders. Outriders was a game that I'm sure Square Enix forced these guys to crunch a bunch. They got paid, let's just say $10 million, right? $10 million is a nice, easy square number. Square Enix got paid $10 million. They financed the game for X amount of dollars, let's say $5 million. They make these guys crunch. They set a hard deadline of like 16 months, 2 months of marketing, day and date on Game Pass on the third month. So at the end of the day, Square Enix comes up on top with 80% pay. They just netted it X amount, X and Y. And then to my knowledge, these developers have yet to be paid. So nothing has come out that has supported that they have been paid by Square Enix. And that's just something that's Microsoft makes a deal with the publisher. And so
Mm-hmm.
how the publisher handles you may be a completely different story. And that's just something that is case by case, And so that's a lot of the concern with the AAA space, is that essentially these large studios basically become small AA studios, and these large publishers make a butt ton of money. Or you'll see something that's currently going on is a lot of consolidation.
Which could potentially impact compensation,
Yes, and
like
and and
what
then
you're
it'll
making.
yes.
If they, we've seen this where if you're trimming the fat. I mean, it's funny we're talking about what I do as a living before we went live, but I've seen this. If you're trimming down the fat, right? That's often budgetary per se, and that impacts potentially impacts what people make for a living, right? And that goes into just and again, I mean, I'm not a developer, but I would imagine that maybe a different skill set's involved, right, to make a game that maybe isn't as demanding per se, right? Um,
Yeah, a different skill set. I mean, it could be adjustment of team sizes. It
yeah.
could be, members on the team wear multiple hats. It can be a bunch of things. Again, the concern here is that us developers are going to be minimized to making a certain kind of video game.
So
And
that's yeah, I've heard that.
those kinds of video games are plentiful in these subscription models because they're easy to churn out and they're easy to take advantage of these deals, right? Those are the kinds of games that would bring me the most net profit. And again, that concern kind of trickles down to the fact that AAA studios with lots of talent and basically 5 to 7 years of career time for one studio, or 3 to 5 years of career time at one studio, had that tenureship is now decreased to something like 1 or 2 years, because that AAA studio talent is now relegated to something along the lines of a single A or even a double A, right? Because $100 million is like on the low end of AAA game development. So if we say something like $20 million, which is about the size of like Capcom games and Sega games. So if we're gonna end up being relegated to a studio like, let's say, Bungie, for example, this is not the case, but Bungie is a studio that we all know this makes a lot of money, blah blah blah. So it's very easy to relate to. Let's say Bungie now is resorted to making games much like I don't know, much like Outriders, much like Fallout 76, right? We would feel a certain type of way as consumers towards Bungie, but Bungie would ultimately come out on top because they're able to make games like Fallout 76 with a team size of like 40, 45 people. If you crunch the numbers and do the salary numbers, they're spending maybe $2 million a year on salary. So over the course of 2 years, that's $4 million on salary. If they get a nice publishing deal from Microsoft that's worth $30 million, I mean, they're making 26 to 24 million dollars worth of net profit. I mean, that drives Bungie's money through the roof for the investors, for the C-level executives, for the studio owners, but the devs are still making salary. So it's you kind of see the concern where the developers are like, "Wait, you guys are getting all of this money, and you guys are in turn hiding it from us, right?" And that's not necessarily the case for every studio. I've heard a bunch of studios do very Epic Games is very generous with their bonuses and their overtime pay. And we'll see the opposite end of the spectrum, like with the Outriders. I think they're called People Can Fly, where they haven't been paid, or we run into this situation like Crytek after Rise, Son of Rome, where they started delaying paychecks because they were running into financial issues. Um, so it varies in the industry, but these issues are not issues that are exclusive to small studios. Again, Crytek is a huge studio. Rise, Son of Rome is a game that launched on the Xbox One. Everybody loved it. Everybody played it. Outriders was a hugely marketed Square Enix game. Again, those two examples specifically. I mean, look at Guardians of the Galaxy, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think Microsoft came out and they said they paid 20 or $25 million for this publishing title, and that helped the game a whole lot. But again, how much of that money did the developers actually see? Because the developers are the ones that are actually making the game and supporting the game through and through. But again, the flip side of the coin is you guys are salary, so why does it matter? Um, if you work in the industry and you see, and if you see yourself working 70 to 80 hours a week for 10 to 12 months in a row, and then you see your game get bought by a publisher for 20-30 million dollars, and you've made no overtime money because your overtime was not approved
Mm-hmm.
for 4 months out of that year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now you're like, wait a minute, I still make my salary, I've got no overtime, and I've worked 2 jobs worth of hours, and I've seen not an extra dime. I'm exploited, I'm taken advantage of, and frankly, I'm expendable. Um, that's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of experience that is very hard to convey to consumers because you're not in that space. Does that make sense? So it's
No,
like
it
the
makes perfect
developer,
sense.
like,
Yeah.
obviously we want to get paid more, or we just want a slice of the pie, right? It's like it's kind of like trickle down economics. Everybody says that it works, it doesn't work. And it's like kind of the same thing. It's like the publisher's like, yeah, we'll give you a slice of the pie, and then they give it to the studio heads or this, studio owners, and then the studio owners go on a permanent vacation or sell the studio, and none of us see anything else. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, I get it, man. I think, those are some interesting. It's an interesting dynamic that a lot of us as consumers don't even think about because I think one, we're just as consumers, I think, detached from that reality because we're only consuming or interested in the final product per se, right?
Yes.
And I hate to say this, we're not necessarily interested about,
No, no,
you
no, I
know,
totally understand.
yeah,
The dichotomy,
and I
the
think there's
dichotomy.
definitely a disconnect, which I'm glad you're bringing this up because a lot of people don't maybe think about it or aware that these things are going on. Um, so it's a fascinating perspective. And again, some of the things you mentioned, I've heard from other developers. Um, others think it's a great opportunity for them to get maybe potential to get exposure for their game, right? Like they look at it as a vehicle where they could potentially get viewership on content that may have not otherwise they may have got lost in the ether, right? Um,
Yeah,
but
it's
I'm
a it's
also
a it's a double-edged sword.
yeah,
That exposure, are not the exposure argument. I don't want to call it an argument. But that exposure side of the sword, the exposure side of the coin, is, it's a gamble. You have to gamble on yourself, right? Like, I hope that this game sells 20 million copies, and I'm gonna bet on myself that it will. And then if
Mm-hmm.
it undersells, then now you're in the hole.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Yeah. No,
sorry, but go ahead.
that's no. And the other thing too, I've also heard some developers express some concern with that. They feel like their game needs to somehow resonate, captivate that gamer from the get, because it's so easy for them to potentially, that person, if they're not really drawn into that game per se, that they may look elsewhere and be like, you know what, I'm not feeling this, and there's so much other stuff on this service I can try, and I'm just going to go elsewhere. Like, it's easy for them to leave, right? Like, what's that saying? You're only as faithful as your options. So, but anyhow, no, Deli, that's again, fascinating perspective from somebody who worked. You worked at Ubisoft, and so that is a really fascinating perspective. So I appreciate you sharing that. Real quick, I do want to grab a super chat here from our good friend Strictly Gaming with the $50 super chat. Thank you for that, Strictly. I really appreciate you, man. It says, Brap, great evening, my guy, and shout out to Deli, being a dope person in the community. Hope everyone's good. So thank you for that, Strictly. Big shout out to him, man. So Deli, man, we got to talk about. I'd be interested in get your perspective at Game Pass at a later date.
Yeah, sure.
Once, I think, especially as Microsoft starts releasing some of their bigger titles in that service, man. But
Yeah, ask me again in about a year when we see a lot more day and date stuff. Obviously, I still work in the industry, and I know a bunch of people who work in the industry. My friends are still there, so able to kind of gather up a consensus for you. So I'll hopefully be able to relay that back to you at a later date.
yeah, no, absolutely, man. I also want to introduce returning guest Game Logic. Game Logic, man. Look, I had to throw up the bat signal, man. We're a little short this evening, man. So I appreciate you joining us here at the 11th hour, man. Thank you. I don't know if is he on mute. Let's see.
Yeah, man, I'm down here in the Aero Cave. I always got the green suit on standby. So whenever you get call to suit up, it's never a problem.
Hey, Game Logic, you are coming in a little distorted, man. Can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it sounds like you're like there's like it's almost like muffled, distorted, I guess.
It sounds like you're talking to us from a Taco Bell, dude.
Yes.
No, I don't have my XLR mic hooked up tonight with the last minute notice, so I think this is as good as it's gonna get.
Okay. All right. Yeah, but no, man, I appreciate that, Game Logic, for joining us, man. All right, so let's go to Halo Infinite, because we're getting oh, actually, let me introduce B Money real quick. Just jumped in. What's up, B?
Oh no, fellas.
Not much, man. Hey, B, I've been meaning to talk to you about the NBA playoffs, man, but maybe we have a separate podcast or something. But I've enjoyed these playoffs this year, man. I'll just say that it's been
Great time so far, man.
It's been fun, yeah. So, although somebody said that Jack moved seats for 6 hours from the floor.
Hey, Brett, I hate to break in, but I was warming up to the conversation for about 5 minutes before I jumped on. Can I throw in an alibi and just ask Kelly one question before you move on?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Kelly, and just before we warm up, things I tend to ask questions that sometimes feel like I'm poking you in the eye. That is not my intent. My intent is just I have sometimes invasive questions that sometimes rankle people's feathers, but that's not the intent.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I wanted to ask, from a fellow developer and engineering perspective, is one of the things I've always wanted to get insight into is, and I heard a lot of the things that you mentioned beforehand. What is your feeling on why people don't leave? And from that perspective, what I'm saying is that I've worked in several different industries, right? As a developer, as a systems engineer, and a software engineer, and there are industries that I enjoy more than others. I would love to go back to like automation and industrial controls and robotics, but in the industry I'm in now, I get paid like disgustingly more greater amount of money, right? It doesn't make sense for me for when I weigh things like my family and like where I'm trying to go in life. It doesn't make sense for me to go back, even though that might arguably professional aspect is something that I enjoy more. So in terms of some of the developers that are in the industry, when I look out and I see that there are millions of software development jobs that are unfilled, right, in industries that would offer better pay, that would offer better working conditions. What are some of your thoughts on like why people don't leave and stay where they are?
Um, why people don't leave the studios or the current positions?
In the industry. I mean, in most cases, in a large number of cases, we're talking about software developers. We're talking about people who have education, who have skill sets, who can pivot and shift over into a decent industry, right, and go work a job. It's not, again, I'm not trying to poke my thumb in anybody's eye, but it's not the same as if somebody is in an unskilled labor job, right, and they can't pivot or they can't shift, or it's not a guarantee that they're going to go to work in an industry that has better conditions.
Actually, a lot of people leave the industry. A lot of people pivot away to an adjacent industry like tech, just because it's better's here or better there. Whether it be minuscule or major shifts in quality of life or monetary gain X and Y. But because the game developer industry is a merit-based industry and along with a revolving door, it's always easy to find somebody to replace me that will do it for cheaper. Um, Actually, that was a lot of the reason why I actually ended up getting hired at Ubisoft. I ended up becoming a lead there at the studio because somebody was on leave and they needed somebody to fill the spot. And I guess I was just dumb enough to raise my hand and be like, yeah, I'll take on more responsibility. Um, but yeah, a lot of people do leave. Actually, a lot of people, actually, the majority of the people who leave or get burnt out are actually the people who are novices in the industry. So it's actually very interesting.
Yeah, just to loop back once to clarify. So, so I understand, right? And I've been engaged in like the argument that like people, if I ask that question, people turn around, right? And they say, well, I don't want to leave because it's easy for me to be replaced or whatever. I'm like, I get it, right? But the point is that like staying in that industry with no kind of disadvantaged positions instead of taking the option to exit the industry and go to something more lucrative is just something that I've always been curious about and that I haven't fully understood, right? And what I mean by when I say, leaving the industry or going to adjacent industry, like some of those developers could go be, work machine learning or AI, right? At, either one of the big five tech firms or, just another, smaller technology firm who's, engaged in some other industry. Some of those people could exit and go to fintech, right? Or another industry. So that's just one of the things that I've been. Again, I get that.
It's passion. It's the love for the industry. It's the love for making game. It's just it's the human condition, I guess. It's feeling like there's a place that we belong or that there's a creative um outlet or whatever it may be. But leaving for adjacent industries is very hard for people who aren't programmers, who aren't designers, because a lot of these guys are QA, a lot of these guys are HR reps, a lot of these guys are marketing, and mind you, these guys can also be in adjacent industries, but game development is a very specific skill set when it comes to a certain type of marketing or a certain type of QA or a certain type of QC or a certain kind of artist that those skills may or may not transfer to an adjacent industry. Mine happened to. I was a level designer. Now I do AR VR design for Microsoft. So I just happened to get lucky and was able to shift over to a larger company. But there are plenty of people that I speak to on the regular that um shifting to a smaller company or shifting to an adjacent company would not solve a lot of their monetary issues that they may or may not have living in a specific city. So that's part of the reason. I guess that is a general a problem that arises in many, not just our industry, just many jobs in general. That healthcare benefits or whatever it may be, or a certain you're used to making a certain X and Y amount of money, that it's hard to exit that kind of space. I know for a fact, for me, I live in the DMV area. If I wasn't getting paid how much I was getting paid, I could not feasibly live here. Um,
Oh yeah,
I
DMV is expensive.
yeah, I might be able to live here if I worked at Bethesda. But I say might.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, and I don't want to sound overly unsympathetic. Yeah, the marketing types and the contracts types and the business types. I mean, I've been less interested in those. It's specifically been from spending the tons of time that I've spent over my career, like coaching and mentoring engineers. It's primarily been around like software developers, systems engineers, sysadmins, DevOps guys, like those guys and girls, right? It's been those types that I've been very curious as to, I mean, I know points where they could exit to, and I've always just been curious about, why they don't sometimes pursue some of those. So thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess if we were able to boil it down to one sentence, it would just be the creative aspect. That's a large reason on why a lot of my cohorts and peers stay where they stay, just because they like that pipeline, that development pipeline.
Right. Right. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to go to speaking of developers. I do want to go to Halo Infinite. As I mentioned, we are we're getting content next week for new Halo DLC content. I'm not going to get all the specifics of the content. I'm pretty sure everyone at this point is, I would assume, is probably aware of what's being released. But this is the second of the content they're releasing for Halo Infinite, and it's season 2. But it's going to be the last for the year. So basically, you're looking at 2 seasons within the first year of Halo Infinite. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Halo's doomed. I don't like saying that. I think Halo's got enough brand power to potentially bounce back. Although I have expressed concerns in previous braps about the handling of the franchise from 343, especially with Halo Infinite. This goes back to when they first revealed, Halo Infinite at E3, and look, we all know the challenges. But I guess my question would be, can 343, and I think they can. I mean, I think 343, if they start delivering content. And I know, Game Logic, we were talking about this. I think, what kind of cadence, what's an appropriate, amount of release cadence for this game. And for me, it would be, like, let's have more than 2 seasons a year, right? I would like to, maybe have maybe a season a quarter to keep things fresh, because I actually did enjoy the Halo Infinite multiplayer. I think the gameplay mechanics are solid. The gunplay's great. Weapons are great. It's a solid arena based shooter. It is. I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of the story content, but that's another conversation. So let me go to you, Deli, first. Like, what are your thoughts about the first year Halo Infinite, them releasing only 2 seasons? What do you think? Like, do you think they need to up the cadence in terms of releasing seasons, new content? Do you think this is a situation where they can kind of maybe right the ship if you feel like it needs to be fixed, I guess?
Well, we don't really necessarily have an option, right? As consumers, we don't necessarily have an option but to wait. I mean, there are several different options. There are different things that can happen, different solutions that have been offered. And I'm sure that the studio heads have spoken, and if they haven't, then they're uh, worried about the wrong thing. But if this conversation hasn't been brought up, whether or not be the IP be handed to somebody else, or additional satellite studios or additional support studios, um, at this point in time, I think 343 is just way in too deep with their proprietary engine and everything, that it would be the wait would be longer if it were to be handed off and ported to a different engine or studio or whatever it may be, because there is an onboarding process when it comes to, like, let's say we bring in id software to help, or to just be the captain of the ship. Well, there would be an onboarding process because their slip space engine is not a id derivative engine. um it's not a general engine as well. To the slip space is not a general engine like Unreal Engine and Unity. It's a very specialized engine for a very specific amount of things that Halo Infinite offers. And so again, that onboarding process, I mean, could take another 4 or 5 months. So at this rate, we kind of have to just let 343 do their thing. Slowly but surely, they will get back on track. As for the cadence, I mean, just mirror everybody else's live service situation. 4 seasons a year, extra monthly content drops, um, just stuff to keep the community invigorated. Because right now, the things that needed to be prioritized are coming way too late. Uh, Forge beta, not the full product, is coming way too late in the year. I think a lot of fans have, and myself as well, have lost faith and have lost hope. Um, but yeah, there's no real clear solution right now. But as a developer, I would say that we just have to let 343 ride it out and fix it in their own time. That may not be the answer that everybody likes, but that is the most plausible answer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and Phil Spencer, Matt Booty, Bonnie Ross, whoever needs to ask for a budget raise or budget increase so that they can hire on these contractors as full-time employees. I understand that there's insurance and benefits that they would have to file and do, and I get a large company wouldn't want to necessarily handle that. But at this rate, it is disrespectful what they're doing with this flagship IP, and I think it's disrespectful of the IP to assume that consumers and the IP itself would be able to survive such a drastic shift in quality and everything else as well. Whether or not it will survive this catastrophic launch, it probably will. It's got a lot of star power, um, but it's dwindling very quickly. I don't know how many people are going to come back for the next Halo, if there is one.
Wow. By the way, disrespect, very, very strong words. But I do see your point. Let me go to Game Logic. What are your thoughts, Game Logic?
Man. Um, well, so I guess the last time when we were on Crossfire, I went down the path of why people care so much. That was not met with resounding approval. Um, I think where I am, maybe I'll try circling around to a different tack tonight. One thing is and it's kind of mentioned on Crossfire as well, in this topic of, and I'm not thinking of it necessarily as cadence, but I'm thinking of it just as, let me go to the cadence, and that's the frequency of the rollover and the turnover of the seasons. I don't necessarily feel that there's one formulaic framework that is like the right one. I think what we see, I think what I feel I see across the industry is that between Apex Legends, Fortnite, Destiny 2, and Call of Duty, that they have all settled into some type of battle rhythm that is suitable for them, which is not necessarily the same. Like, I feel like the Call of Duty seasons are like 10 weeks ish. At least it was when I was really putting a lot of time into it in was Cold War, and I feel like Destiny has settled into the framework that Kelly mentioned, which is once a quarter or every few months. And then I feel like Fortnite is doing something that's a smidge different. They're all kind of somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 to 15 weeks or whatever, and you'll see them. I feel like you'll see them kind of throttle that based on if they're encountering adversity or if there's a particular nit that's going on out in the community. So I feel it's mostly a matter of finding the right battle rhythm that's right for the team and its communities that keeps everybody relatively happy. The community is kind of like never really happy, so it's just finding that right thing. I think of Crossfire, one of the things that was mentioned too was this notion of there's tons of live service games for them to follow the example of. And I don't know that I agree with that. Yeah, like I think there's Apex Legends, Fortnite, Call of Duty, and Destiny 2. And then I feel like past that, when we get down to what I would think of as kind of Q2, Q3, and lower live service games that I don't know that I would necessarily follow wholesale those examples. I might kind of cherry pick some elements from each of them, but it hasn't been this smooth, easy way for implementation of live service games, particularly in the shooter genre. And I also feel like, whether you isolate to Battle Royale or just look about it in general, I also feel like the industry in the market is only going to support so many that are really giants. And then once you get beyond those 2 or 3, then I feel like, it starts to, your profitability potential starts to slope off, a great deal. So I don't know that I agree that there's a ton of examples for them to follow. I feel like they need to figure out what's right for them. Certainly, on the examples that are out there. I think when we also see in terms of kind of following examples, each of these teams doesn't necessarily say, hey, we're going to do that. We're doing the same thing that Fortnite did, right? Because they don't always necessarily have the same ability, and they don't always necessarily feel that's the right fit. Then the other thing is, the big thing for me is, again, people figuring out who's a big amount of content. Slow-mo, I think you mentioned, Slow-mo talked about the maps, and feeling that that wasn't not enough content. But then when I think Xbox went through kind of what was coming in season 2, when you listen to his articulation, it presents the feeling that there's a lot more content there, right? So it's 2 maps, like 3 permanent modes, I would say. 2 narrative events, some number of LTMs, which I'm not absolutely clear on. Of course, the battle pass, and then at least 1 LTE. The other things I talk about on Twitter is it's that framework that I feel like consumers need to settle and determine what is sufficient for them. I kind of agree with Slow-mo. I'm a big person about maps. Like, I don't really care about modes. In fact, one of the things that was always kind of a turnoff to me is I don't stick with that game like all the way through. And so when I've played with friends, one of the things that's always frustrating me is I play with friends and they throw me into all these goofy modes that I don't know and I don't understand. So I can care less about the modes. I too am a person who's a lot like maps. And even when I was on Call of Duty, that was the thing that was most attractive to me. But their limited time modes felt like they were conveyed a little more clearly, and so I was able to with those. And I also saw over time how those studios had the attention to if a limited time mode, if they felt it was sticking with the community, that they would really make permanent, right, or bring it back for another season. So I feel like those are some of the things that need to settle out. And the last thing I'll mention is on Twitter was, I think, HT Gamer, he and I were involved in the conversation, is if you're gonna return to green, right, if you're gonna declare this a crisis, if you're gonna send fire jumpers in, just like Deli mentioned, like you can't show up to a development team in crisis and just have them crap content right out of nowhere. You don't.
Yeah.
Throughout my career, my career, right, is my boss is telling me, hey, this is in crisis, go help them out and fix the problem. And when I do that, I show up and I figure out critical things that have to be done right now. And then I go back to my boss and I tell them, look, I'm going to get these 2, 3, 4 things fixed right now. And then I need you to like not bother me for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? Because I'm not going to be able to just like solve everything right out of the blue. I feel like the same thing here, and maybe 343 is doing that. My other thing would be, they also have to figure out like who's the critical thing that's going to, quite frankly, shut the most mouths as quickly as possible. And in that, there may be a problem with the pipeline, either the talent on the team, the tools, total number of FTEs, as Deli mentioned, right, or some say. And so figuring out if the community puts the most value from that content desire perspective on maps, then something I think needs to be done to focus on that and deliver that, potentially at the cost of like an LTM or an LTE or something that the community is worried less about, to start kind of feeding that piece and get some of the people off your back until you have the time to kind of focus on those other things and kind of cyclically go towards where you're taking on weeks, right, and catch those goals.
Game Logic. Sorry, you're breaking up there towards the end, man. But
Yeah, I was just saying, if maps is the most important thing to your community, then like focus on that, right? And do what you need to do to swing effort and talent and expertise that way, so that you can reduce the amount of public pressure you're getting from the community, right? Potentially at the expense of, hey, maybe not instantiating so many, limited time modes and limited time events if what people care about are the maps mostly.
Yeah, focus on that. Yeah, yeah. B, what are your thoughts, man, on Halo Infinite, man? Did we lose B? He's on mute. All right. We'll get B back here in a second. So, yeah, Deli, I kind of agree with you, man, on some of the things you said. You as well, Game Logic. Just to kind of wrap up this particular topic, but I do think, obviously, I think like you said, Game Logic coming in a crisis mode. I mean, I think fixing those issues, paramount, probably priority number one. But I do think regular cadence, again, it could be something in the vein of what Destiny's doing or Call of Duty would be welcome. And I'd like to see newer maps per se, that as opposed to just different game modes that might not be appealing to me within the same map. So. But again, I do think. I mean, look, you never say never. I mean, they could turn this thing around, or not. I mean, time will tell. We'll find out if they're able to kind of right the ship. Obviously, I think they're going to have some time to do so, given how important this franchise is to Microsoft. Although, again, how they've handled this franchise, considering how big it is to the Xbox brand, is trivial, I guess. So, all right, I want to move on. And Deli, this is kind of right up your alley, man. Ubisoft is rumored to be up for sale. It does sound like some private equity firms may be the more likely buyers of Ubisoft. But when you heard this news, man, what were your thoughts?
Well, when I was working there a couple years back, I mean, we saw this boiling. I spoke to several people in your circle, mainly Mo and Forte over at the DPS podcast. I told them that a couple of things would have to happen. First would be, I mean, an acquisition of this size over Ubisoft would have to see the removal of the Guillemots. There are 3 or 4 family members that own a lot of the stock. And since it's primarily a family-owned company, it would be very hard to remove those guys. But it seems like over the last couple months, they have noticed a steady decline in financial situation and quality, and basically Scrum and Agile is not looking to be top tier in all of their studios. So it seems like they have bailed on the ship. So at that point, and a lot of the senior people leaving, and of course all the allegations and stuff going out, it is very hard to paint Ubisoft and continue to paint it in a good light in this very dynamic situation that we have, to put it lightly. So yeah, it's very hard for me to think that a major publisher or one of the big three will buy Ubisoft. The reason why I say that is because it's not so much the monetary situation, right? I think their stock is like $30 up right now. Anybody could buy them. The problem is that they have over like 13,000 employees. So it's very hard to manage that kind of employee base when there are like 30 studios across the globally. Um, it would take a lot of power to one, continue to have those employees, and keep them all happy. And two, it would also take a lot of power, energy, um, and money in order to be able to convene a lot of those. We've seen a lot of acquisition failures in the past, especially with Microsoft when they acquire studios and they um, ask these studios to move to Redmond or move to a certain area. EA has done the same. They consolidate these studios and move all of the employee base to a certain area. Um, so to avoid the historical pitfalls that these other publishers have gone, one of the big three would have to essentially keep the employee base where they are, and it would be very they would be very stretched thin, to put it, if that makes any sense. They would be stretched very thin to have an employee base of like 13,000 on top of whatever they're currently managing worldwide. There would have to be some sort of expansion.
Really, one question, two questions that I want to ask you is when you talk about Agile and Scrum not being at its peak in some of those studios, do you mean that that it is not taking root and not being executed well, and that those teams are kind of falling back to more like a waterfall or a spiral, and therefore they're not maintaining the velocity that they need to, or are
I
you
think
doing something else?
it's something else, an external factor. So at Ubisoft, we have an editorial team, which is something like a corporate suit, set of suits that basically we have to pass and pitch all of our ideas to. So Ubisoft as a company is in the business of making money, not in the business of making games. So the game developers don't necessarily make games. So the editorial team essentially has a lot of control over what happens inside these studios, especially the one I was in San Francisco. So basically, what would happen is that we would have something that we would want to create an extra protagonist, a story, another character, another level, season pass, whatever it may be. Any decision that needs to happen, any major decision in the development pipeline needs to happen. The problem is that this is impeded by essentially this external team that we all have to wait whether or not they give us the go ahead or not. And that really reduces the production pipeline and the speed of which we uh, essentially go full force on, whether it be crunch mode or something like that, is that having to wait for these pitch meetings to go through. And mind you, the editorial team is roughly the size of about 100 people, and out of recent years they've been split up so that there's an editorial team instead of one editorial team in charge of all of the studios. There's small editorial teams that are in charge of each individual studio, so it's like the slice of the everybody gets a slice of the pie. And yeah, it's just this really really inconvenient and weird roadblock that is not like anything that I've seen at any other studio or anything that I've seen at any studio that I've applied to. This isn't some sort of exact. This isn't Sony. This isn't Microsoft. This isn't studio leads. This is like again an external factor, an external source of people that aren't necessarily game developers. To be frank, most of them are marketers or lawyers that sit right next to Yves Guillemot. One of them being his son, actually. So it's very hard to develop games when the people who are leading the decisions all, well, they don't change. So that's actually a lot of the reason why over the last decade you've seen a lot of the same fundamentals that are in each Ubisoft game, because it's the same 50 people or it's the same 100 people voting on the same exact thing over and over and over and over again. Um yeah, it's
So,
Yeah,
so
so yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, back.
it sounds like you know what you're describing. That is kind of people who really aren't developers who sit on this board. The developers are pitching ideas, but I think what you're it sounds like the stagnation that we're seeing with all the games feeling like they're the cookie cutter. You know, we joked around with Halo Infinite saying it's, you know, the Ubisoft version of Halo, right? That it's that reason, right? That they're just saying this works, this model works, this has been selling well. Let's just keep making it, but let's throw a different name on that cookie cutter type game, right?
Yeah, and because they're the same people, it's kind of hard to essentially change their opinion,
Yeah. Wow.
regardless of the IP. So many of the things that we know in the studio are, if you would like a black character, you would have to make them the darkest skin shade as possible, and then maybe through the pipeline they'll get made into a fair skinned character. Maybe they'll come out at the other end looking like Jennifer Lawrence. Who knows? You know, like it's a toss up, it's a gamble, but again, it's very very hard to change the ideas of those same people. So that's why.
So it sounds like that board is essentially acting as the product owners for the various games in production. And part of the problem is that there is a governance process, or maybe a lack of one. Getting approval through those people doesn't maintain cadence in sync with the agile sprint release plan framework that the studios are trying to work to.
Yes.
I think, wow, that's really insightful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Like I'm like, this kind of makes sense now. Why we get the same games?
Yeah, I mean, once you mind you, this editorial
Yeah.
team has been, again,
Yeah.
when it was the bigger editorial team, a lot of those members sat right next to Yves
That's why I'm
Guillemot.
not getting my Splinter Cell.
Yeah, well, that's a difference. That's that's a totally different issue, but yeah.
Yeah, that's really, by the way, it's really insightful, and it's really interesting. You talk about the challenges of managing those teams globally, right? And you know having, and I can't even fathom trying to manage and organize all that, but you know I don't even know if you know, and again, there's rumors that a private equity firm may pick them up, but I don't even know if that's the solution to the issues that they're having. Obviously there's culture issues there.
There's just a lot of rebuilding that you would have to do.
Yeah.
And sorry, the 13,000 is incorrect. It's actually 19,000 employees around the world.
Wow.
So it's more than 13.
So one of the things I wanted to ask, particularly with what you mentioned about that there's supposedly potentially a private equity firm at certain levels. Joey, do you think anybody would potentially come in, make a sale, that sale would predominantly be an IP grab, and then that they would, in a self-managed way, look to break apart and sell some of those studios off, kind of a la what happened to THQ during its bankruptcy, and then whoever picked up, there would be somebody who would then try to pick up a bunch of them to kind of keep those core IPs together with whatever talent needed to go along with them, but that there would be less of a concern of an outcome that was oriented around trying to keep all 19,000 of those employees together.
I don't think that they're gonna split with any of the IPs solely for the fact that a lot of those 19,000 employees are currently working on said IPs. So it would, I mean, they would have to take another loss on the books, on top of the losses that they're already taking. So and whether or not that would be remedied by just the financial gain of the IP, um, is like that's not irrelevant, but that's evident that monetarily they will recover and recoup. The issue is that as a company, as laying people off and stagnating these IPs, or essentially throwing away everything that has currently been worked on and money is spent on, that is something that is hard to recoup, because these are people's lives that are at stake, and not just the IPs. So as a company, I think Ubisoft is in a very dire situation that they can't necessarily sell off these IPs. They could sell off the dormant ones, right? However much they're worth. But the ones that are currently in production, which there are many, um, it's kind of hard to leverage that with the numerical loss of the employees that are attached to that, right? Because while the monetary gain is uh, a finite number, right? Like say $10 million, right, for one IP. Um, the metric loss of a tangible employees, a tangible number of output, a tangible number of essentially profit, talent, whatever it may be, that may or may not be worth more than X or Y dollars to Ubisoft as a whole. So that's why I think that they're in a position to where you know they can't sell off their IPs.
So, like,
Go ahead,
for
Game
those,
Logic.
yeah, yeah, for those, so I see those. One other perspective that I will just throw out, though, is for consideration is, I mean, are any of those IPs not dormant except for Rainbow Six Siege right now? Meaning that, in my mind, and I can be forgetting some, they're big IPs, they're big properties. Ghost Recon, even Splinter Cell if it's coming back in some form, right? Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, right? All of those are in some state of incubation right now, getting ready to make the pivot to some type of weird live service thing. And so I just when I look at that, I'm like, which is a gamble, right? Based on where they are right now, but let's say it's a 50-50 chance of success. But so do you feel like presented those odds that there would not be interest and desire, just kind of exiting the pattern, not taking that gamble, and letting those things be sold off and letting another company kind of deal with that outcome.
Well, a lot of their dormant franchises aren't necessarily um, financially viable for these larger companies. Um,
Please don't say
so
Splinter Cell.
um, so yeah, no, Splinter Cell is in development. It's been in development for several years now. They scrapped 6 prototypes, but this new one seems to be very promising.
Is it open world?
Um, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, yeah, okay. I hope it's not open world.
It's a remake. That I know.
Well, did they say it was going to be a remake? I feel like we heard that before. No, maybe
I
I'm.
think what was officially announced is that we're getting a remake, not a remaster. So there may be some monkeying around with the linearity of the story, but the impression I got from the announcement is that this won't be a wholesale shift and change. But they did. The one thing that makes me nervous about that is that it seemed like what I remember them mentioning is that they were staging it so that it would be a jumping off point for further stories, right? So that's when you get the lean towards where there may be the aperture that leans towards open world. But still, at the end of the day, I feel like this is something more leaning towards the Resident Evil 2 remake, where it's a pretty faithful remake, maybe with some quality of life updates. But
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the Resident 2 remake was great. I mean, that was a great remake. Yeah. I hope this comes out well. Splinter Cell is one of my favorites.
I do too. I would have stayed at Ubisoft if they moved me to the Splinter Cell project.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. I asked plenty of times. They said no.
I
That's, I left.
want to work on Sam Fisher, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that, man. I do want to move on to last subject here. Oh boy, I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to pick on Destin Legary here. No, look, I've never been one. If you've listened to Brap for the last 7 years, I've never got on that media bias, train, if you will. I've had numerous disagreements with Mooch about media bias. And we still kind of disagree to an extent on that, but I'm coming around to the idea that the gaming media is not what it used to be. And as we talked about this earlier, Game Logic, I kind of thought back to some of the publications I used to read. I was a GameSpot forum moderator when Greg Kasavin was there, and was it Rico Torres? And I'm trying to think who else. The guy that started Giant Bomb. What's his name? Jeff Gertzman. I had interactions with those individuals because as a GameSpot moderator, because there was like a back channel messaging system that we would all use to communicate. And I would speak to them, and we talk video games at times, and so I felt like they probably did a better job, I think, of covering gaming. And not that all gaming journalists are bad, but I feel like there's been a little bit of a drop off. And I've always kind of maybe sided, I guess, with game media, if you want to say sided. But again, I haven't been as critical. I guess that's probably better to say. I haven't been as critical about video game media or gaming journalists. Because I do think there's some good ones out there. We had Jeff Grubb on last week. I enjoy the content that Jeff puts out. We've had Ryan McCaffrey on the show twice. I enjoy the content Ryan McCaffrey puts out. But then there's Destin, and Destin's an interesting character, and I think he's playing a character. I think part of that is to push his platform per se. And he's always had that kind of persona about him, saying things that kind of stir the pot or rile people up. He did it last generation, so I guess he's been inconsistent in that regard. But he had some interesting takes on and I don't know why this is still being discussed, but PlayStation revealed the different tiers for PlayStation Plus. They have that platinum tier that has not demos, so you see people conflating or using the word demo in a way that's not true to the definition of demo. When Sony themselves has said, hey, we're doing game trials, and again, those things are actually two different things, and Destin, for whatever reason, is referring to them, and I think had this video out. Hold on a sec here. I want to pull this up. Give me just a sec here. And his video he was referring to as demo being paid, a demo being paywall. And again, let me just read the definition. What's up, Gimme Forte?
Man, what up, though? Just got home from work. Y'all better get y'all facts right up in here.
My goodness.
This is the Brat Podcast, right? Basement Radio Arcade Podcast.
Yes, it is.
We gotta make sure that when we in our basement playing our games, that our facts are right.
Facts are very important, Forte.
They are very important. So go ahead and finish your soliloquy. Go ahead.
I feel like Forte is trolling me right now.
Why you do that?
Because you do that. I see you do it to slow-mo.
What do I do to slow-mo?
You troll him.
Tune in to DPS Podcast tomorrow to see what that's going to be like.
I love I love when you do it too, because he does fall for it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, you're making me blush.
All right, so a demo is a limited version of a game intended to let interested gamers try it before purchasing. Demos usually offer a very limited window into the game, usually just a few levels or features. By the way, this is actually as defined by the support page on Xbox.com. So, because I know people would be like, "Oh, Enrique's a pony." Well, for those who say that, I'm pulling it from your beloved platform. What is a trial? Trials are full versions of a game, but they offer a limited amount of gameplay for people who haven't purchased it yet. Unlike a demo, which may only have 1 or 2 levels, a trial may be the whole game, but only playable for a few hours prior to purchase, which Sony said they're going to give game trials of 2 hours. If you choose to purchase, the trial unlocks the full game, and you don't need to download it again. This is what EA offered as well behind a paywall, where you could do trials using their EA. I forget what EA service is.
EA Play.
EA Play. Thank you. But what's interesting is Destin is calling this a demo. And again, like, I feel like if you're a gaming journalist, and I never thought I would be saying this, Forte. Like, really, like, I've never been on the whole media bias train or media is terrible. That just never, because I do appreciate the work that the media does. I don't think it's easy per se, but if you've been in the game as long as he has, you should at least get the definitions correctly. And you shouldn't be saying that these are demos when in fact they're not. And Sony has said as much. And there is a difference between demos and game trials. So that within itself is kind of like, wait a minute, dude. Like, you should know better. What was the
actual statement that they said when they announced this? What was the? If I remember correctly, they said time
game trials.
It's always been
time game trials. That is what is on their page. That is what is on the PlayStation blog. That is what is on in all their ad copies.
Yeah. That's what I thought it always said. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't wrong. Once again, based where our podcast, where we get our facts right.
Oh my God, Forte! Go ahead. Forte.
Yes.
Yeah, Forte.
Yes. Are you want to ask for my opinion on this?
No,
but I mean, the one thing I would mention is I have been on record several times as saying my personal feeling is, from my own performance evaluation of them as a business, is that it is not unusual for Sony to have a messaging. And so, so I ascribe to those definitions as well. That's what I talked about on Twitter today. That to me, and Delhi, certainly search yourself in. You think I'm screwed up. To me, a demo at the code level is inherently a fragment of the overall base, right? It is stubbed out code that doesn't consist of all of the content. Obviously, I wouldn't want everybody to download and unpack all of the assets that go along in the game for levels that they're not even going to be exposed to, right? So it's a lighter weight package that winds up being delivered. Whereas in a time game trial, theoretically, in most cases, the entire game would be downloaded, and as I was talking to you today, somebody would then, just like you do on your mobile phone, like you get an app and you say, hey, remove all ads, right? And you pay your 99 cents, $1.99 or whatever, it unlocks, right? But no new download necessarily happens. And I know that there are other delivery models where there are times when I do that, I pay the fee, and then I do get a new app delivered, right? But in essence, right, the models that I would expect is, demo, small amount of code, you buy the game, it starts to download a bunch of additional stuff, or an entirely new download versus a time game trial. However, it would not surprise me for Sony to come back with a later announcement that unravel all of that, and that what they're actually talking about is demos. I believe that they are talking currently about time game trials, but it would surprise me that it's a big mess up. And I think the journalists have additionally been screwing it up because they keep, in all their articles, they keep going back and forth between calling them TGTs and demos, right, concurrently within the same article.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's kind of been what I've been seeing, from journalists too, the kind of back and forth. But the other thing too, and then I'll get the rest of the panel here. I did find it interesting that Sony including game trials in their platinum tier is really just an enhancement on top of what they are at, or what's included in this package, right? which is no different than what Destin's doing with his own channel, where he has subscription tiers to access videos that are paywalled, that aren't available for free. And those things are, in the same fashion, enhancements to his platform. Same thing, same concept. I don't understand why he is, basically shaming Sony for something he's essentially doing too. He's doing the same thing.
Can we all be in unison and say that trials should not be something you pay for?
I think my problem was that it's just, I always got to pick one other cat member, I guess, to get in a fight with. Is I don't, what I mentioned to somebody would have argue with that space. Number one, from a software perspective, unless a customer really knows the costs, right, and pricing breakdown, and I'm not giving you itemized pricing, the reality is any software customer signing up for a bundle of stuff doesn't really know what they're paying for, right?
That's true.
If Sony had made the announcement and just didn't include that bullet line item, right, you have no idea that you were being charged for it, right? And they could be charging you a vast amount for it. That could be the bulk of the cost, right? We don't know. But the other thing is that, and I'm not saying you're saying it, just there are a lot of people who are on Twitter who are like, you're paying for this, you're paying for that. Like, don't cherry pick a thing out of the bullet line, right, and say that's not what you're paying for. I don't believe. Like, the comparison to me to the 740 games that premium, right, versus the 300 plus games that you get in Game Pass, right? That's the hot dog, right? That's the thing that all those other things that I like Brad mentioned is the same way I'm thinking about it. There are dollops of chocolate on the Sunday, right? There's extra stuff that you get. That, at least in my position, if I was a customer, I would just say, that's just an extra benefit. That this itemized thing of like, you're charging me for this, you're charging me for that. I'm like, I feel like it's just not the consumer behavior that we show, right, when we're doing other things. Like, when you buy groceries, you're being charged for the plastic of the paper bag, right? It's just varying the cost, and you don't really get it. Right, all of that and stuff all goes into cost, and people pay for it. But for some reason, in this aspect, people, I feel like, are overreacting to a thing that's called out on a bullet list.
Well, the problem is, and I agree with everything you just said. But the problem is, when you put an itemized list up there, you're asking it to be compared. That's just
that's the messaging problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's just the natural selection when it comes to stuff like that. You see two things, you're going to compare them. You see Game Pass, you see PlayStation Premium, or you see extras. You compare them. It's just a natural thing, even though in so many ways they're kind of not comparable to each other, because they do vastly different things when it comes to like the main purpose of what those platforms are. Everybody talks about Game Pass being a really good value, but the really good value is mostly due to the fact that Microsoft puts their first party in there, and that's the main value of Game Pass. And then they subsidize that with all the extra content that they throw in there from third parties over the course of like a 6 to a year period, or sometimes even faster, depending on what game it is. Sometimes third party day and date. PlayStation's doing the same thing. They're just missing the day and date part of it. So that's kind of the only real true difference. But when I saw this, I instantly, when I first looked at it, I said, why are we paying for demos? Because inherently,
not a demo.
Trial. When you look at it, it's like you're automatically downloading these games instantly anyway. Like, it's in a service. If the game, so you're getting access to a service that the games are already downloadable in. Like I said, the one thing I was waiting to see, is it going to be like particular games that aren't out yet that you're able to download and stream early, not stream, but download and play early before their release date? Is that the benefit of being in that? Is that the benefit of the demo feature? So you're going to get early access to it, pretty much like how EA does with EA Play. You get a week early access to it, plus they give you 10 hours of of the experience, and then if you buy the full game, you get the whole experience plus your stuff carries over. They didn't really dive deep into that. We really didn't know what exactly that was. It does look like there will be games that aren't available in the service that will be inside of that will have like game trials that will be in the service that are not available inside the service. And that's going to be a benefit to some people because it's going to be games that you can't buy that way. But the majority of these games I always looked at as like, most of these games are already going to be in the service. So why do I need a trial for a game that's already going to be available for me just to download and play the whole experience right then and there? That was the kind of mixed messaging for me.
Right. So the articulation, as I understand it, is to the publishers / independent developers. Basically, if you want to sell a game in our storefront that has a wholesale price of greater than $34, then your game will be put up with a targeted game trial, so that people who are subscribers to the premium service, so these are not part of PlayStation Plus.
Right.
Call of Duty, theoretically, Call of Duty comes out at the end of this year. If this thing is enabled by then, it's got a wholesale price greater than $34. It will be a time game trial will be offered for it, so that people who want to buy the new Call of Duty, which will not be in the PlayStation Plus service, get an opportunity to play that game for 2 hours before they make their purchase. In terms of value, to me, I wasn't being connected earlier today. Is I'm pretty sure that everybody has all sorts of little anecdotal differences right in their personal experiences. Quite honestly, while I was on PlayStation, I never had a need to return a digitally purchased game to the PlayStation Store. I never had to ask for a refund, so I don't, actual experiences. But from a policy perspective, there are no refunds for digital games, right? The policy states that if you start the download, you are not entitled to a refund. And even if you buy the game, for some reason didn't start the download, you have 14 days, right, to ask for one. And so the value, not describing, not saying that everybody should value this, but the pragmatic result of being a PlayStation Plus Premium subscriber will be that you can test drive these games essentially for 2 hours, right, before you decide to make your purchase, which, making the purchase may put you in the danger zone of needing a refund and not being able to ask for it. My own personal use of Game Pass, in fact, the reason that I eventually tipped over and subscribed to Game Pass, because I didn't get on board Game Pass right away. Number one was it being offered on PC. Number two was also because of the fact that I had purchased the game and tried to get a refund for it and was not granted a refund, right? And I was like, Game Pass gives me an opportunity to test drive these things before I'm going to move to purchase. And I've had, because I'm digital only, I've had bad experiences with all the vendors, right? So none of them do it well. In my opinion, Steam doesn't do it great. Xbox doesn't do it great. I would assume the PlayStation, thing also isn't great. My experience with Epic Games Store has been great. But any opportunity that I have to de-risk myself from that danger zone, I look at it as a plus. Again, I'm not going to be a PlayStation Premium subscriber, but if I were those 740, I would look at the time game trials as an added enhancement value on top of that in order to de-risk myself from buying those games that I may not want, that may not work well, that I may want to return because they're much.
Yeah. So, real quick, I just want to chime in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, Forte, because you probably want to jump in.
Oh, you ain't cut me off, bro. Go ahead.
Okay.
I said what I needed to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like game trials or to be free. Game trials or demos historically haven't always been free. In some instances, from a marketing perspective, they have been offered free, but they've also been paywalled. That part is so this idea that this has never happened isn't necessarily true. But for me personally, as a consumer, I say this, that, I would like for it to be free, but I was also someone that was in that $120 tier already because I had both PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now.
Yeah, same.
For me, having those game trials is an added value. It's something that wasn't there. Sony didn't have to include this, but they are, like all companies do, and even like what Destin Legary's doing with his channel, where he's trying to, build in, additional value and entice people to subscribe to a different tier. Sony is doing the same thing here, and I don't. Again, if it's not for you, that's fine. Like I don't have an issue with that. My issue is more specific, more directed at Destin and his everyone saying things like everyone knows this is a bad deal. Well, Destin, how do you know everyone knows it's a bad deal? I mean, it may be a bad deal for you, and that's fine, but you're a journalist who's been covering the industry for a long time. You should know better than to use those kind of blanket statements and to try to apply what value is to general consumers. It's fine if it doesn't work for you. But again, what Sony's doing is just an enhancement of what they're offering with, the platinum tier. And for me, again, I'm only speaking for myself. Again, if you don't see value in it, and that's totally fine, that's within your right. But for me, I was already in that $120 tier. I looked at it okay. So they kind of, cause I wasn't sure if I was going to stay in that $120 tier, but they sweetened the pot for me to stay in there. So now I have the opportunity to try games out, do a 2 hour game trial. And there's potentially an opportunity for me to save, more than $35 by trying a game out for 2 hours. Instead of just making an impulse buy and saying, oh, wait a minute, I don't like this game. And now like Game Logic said, there's no refunds. Like Sony's really not, they don't do that. they really don't. And so for me, there's value in that. Now, everyone may not see that, and that's fine. Again, I want to reiterate that if you don't see value in it, that's fine. I guess I just find it a little interesting that people are so up in arms about this when, like Game Logic said, they're actually participating in this very same thing where companies are building things in to enhance a tier or a service. They're doing this. They're actually participating in this already. So I just find it interesting that they're up in arms and the pitchforks are out when in reality they're doing. And that's why I always say, like, for some reason, when it comes to the gaming industry, people treat it differently and they forget that consumers behave the same way in this industry as they do in other industries, right? That we all see value in different things. We're all motivated by different things. Forte, you are the guy that's going to go out and buy a 3080 Ti, and then when the 4080 Ti comes out, even though you got the 3080 a month ago, you're going to go out and buy the 4080 Ti, right? Where I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy.
Yes, you are.
You don't have to buy, exactly. You have to buy Blackdown to get into the Halo 3 beta or whatever that thing was.
You're breaking up, Game Logic. I couldn't hear you there, man.
Did you have to buy Crackdown to get into like the Halo 3 beta or something like that?
You had to buy Crackdown. You had to buy Crackdown 2 to get into the Halo, one of the Halo betas. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, we've had precedent before where you to pay in, but a lot of times to get access to like a trial or a beta, you have to pre-order the game, right? So demos, targeting content, whatever you want to call it, they're just for them being paywalled. It's not like this is new. Again, and this is a service thing that's being layered on top of, right? The real value add to me, and like you said, is rather than kind of being in a position where I think today the current status is that kind of wanting to get availability of demos, right, or time game files, or some manner to test drive games before we plunk down for them. This is a service vector that is oriented around, and again, I'm leaning forward and making a bit of an assumption. It's in the ad copy that this may not necessarily include every single game. Let's just say for the sake of argument, it's all of them, or at least the majority. This is kind of a blanket approach that if you're on PlayStation Plus Premium, you would expect that for any big games that are above that $34 wholesale mark, big AAA games, you're going to have an opportunity to test drive them. And since those are going to be the games that are going to be the 60, it seems to me those are the ones that are most critical that you get an opportunity to go hands on with them right before you make that decision.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm going to translate here because some people mentioned that they're having a hard time understanding game logic. But what game logic is also saying, for those who didn't hear, like the game trials or betas, if you will, have been paywalled, have been only accessible by purchasing other games that you may not be. I know people that bought Crackdown 2, had no interest, only so they can get, I think it was the Halo Reach beta, right? That did that because they wanted to get into that beta. I know people that will pre-order games. I mean, Forte, how many times have you had people come to GameStop, do a $5 pre-order just to get into a beta of a game, right?
All the time.
All the time, right? I mean, I'm guilty of that. I did that with the Battlefield beta. I went out, pre-ordered it for $5, and then realized I didn't have to do that because of my EA membership, but I did it anyway. But I've done that on numerous occasions where you pre-order a game, you spend $5, you put the $5 down, and you do that because you want to get into the early beta. Somebody brought up Zone of the Enders. I remember Zone of the Enders. There was a Metal Gear Solid 2 game demo. People only bought, everyone, a lot. There were people that bought that game only to have access to, Metal Gear Solid 2. And look, I'll go back years ago with the official Xbox magazine, where they actually had demo disc, and I subscribed to that magazine. Rarely did I ever really read the magazines. I only really just got the subscription to have access to those demos. Now, again, we've had instances where, demos have been, free, but again, my point is, if it's not for you, that's fine. I just don't think it deserves that, the fire and brimstone that we're seeing over it, and people just, with their pitchforks and, beating their chests. And again, I just find what Destin's doing is a little disingenuous, considering he's actually participating and implementing these same, I guess, tactics, if you will, with his own platform, which is interesting. Yeah, I'm going to go to Deli real quick. Deli, man, what are your thoughts on this, man?
Well, I mean, I think the age of demos are gone. I mean, in the previous generation, we saw that demos came out readily available for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. I mean, I remember buying the PlayStation 3 and downloading the Devil May Cry 4 demo, and then the Metal Gear Solid 4 demo as well, and playing those over and over and over and over again. But again, the problem is that the demo days are over because flagship titles and system sellers are kind of far and few between right now, with the development cycles being longer than 12 to 18 months like it used to be. So it's very hard to reliably come out with something like, I don't know, like the Order 1886, right? To be able to cut something down or to cut an early portion of it as a teaser and then market that as, on the exclusive platform. It usually leads to more negative press than not, along with not making a lot of money, or actually not making any money at all, and while stressing developing teams. So yeah, I mean, if you can imagine that these people already compare E3 showcases years and years afterwards, if you were to get a free demo of a video game, I'm sure that the internet would make that and turn that into a much worse vehicle for whatever angle that they're pushing. But right now, the unknown is whether or not Sony asked for the devs, which I think that they came out. I don't know. I keep reading things on the internet, but around the rumor mill is that Sony is not asking the devs what these time trials may be. But my question right now is whether or not Sony asked the devs at all what portions they're cutting out for the trials, or if it's like EA, like Forte say, where it's just a full game and it's the flat out 2 hours, and however far you make it in 2 hours or whatever, or 10 hours, Or is it like Devil May Cry 5 and it's one level in 2 hours and you can replay as much as you want until those 2 hours is over? Or is it going to be like Resident Evil 8 where if you reach the end of the level, that's it, and that's the end of the trial. And if the trial is 2 hours long, but you beat the level in 28 minutes, then that's it. That's the end of the trial. You don't get your extra time. It's just whatever. So whether or not you finish that level or you finish the 2 hours, you're going to be done regardless. So there are a lot of actual questions that I have as a developer and a consumer about how this will impact my job, my career, and of course my my livelihood, I guess, down the road. But yeah, those are the questions I have a lot of questions. I want answered by Sony. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. Sure. I mean, you guys said that Sony isn't refunding people, so technically, this is a feature that they're giving people. If you really like, it's a stretch, but it is what it is, right? Because technically they're not giving refunds, so technically this would be a feature. Yeah, it is what it is.
It is a feature.
You're not. That's not something y'all want to hear, but technically it's the truth, right? So whether or not this saves people money or whatever, it's great because it's not something that is innately owed to us. As we've seen in the past where like these game developers come out with demos, and then of course with the next generation or with the legacy consoles that we just had, demos kind of became far and few in between and then just completely phased out of existence altogether. So it's just something that Sony hasn't necessarily, and Microsoft as well, hasn't necessarily owed us, and that hasn't been given to us. So it making a resurgence in the form of a time trial is quote unquote technically new. So yeah.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
I was gonna say real quick. I'm sorry, Forte. Real quick, Deli. I think you bring up an interesting point about the differences of yesteryears with the development cycle, right? And why, how you said it's no longer 12 to 18 months, right?
Yeah.
And now, these demos could kill, sales too. And I would imagine that maybe that's the case for game trials as well. But I thought it was interesting that you brought that development piece up because I don't think that's something that many of us would even think about anyway, right? As consumers. Although it is something I would expect Destin to know, considering his ties to the industry. Destin.
Oh man.
Yeah, with the 12 to 18.
I got a brap rant coming from Forte, but
I see. Oh man.
Well, with the 12 to 18 month development cycle, it's like we're able to get much more content. I mean, look at the PlayStation 3. You had a bajillion third-party titles coming out every year. Like you had 40, 50, 60 games coming out a year. That's 5 games a month. Now we're lucky to get 3 games a month. That are the size of a AA to AAA, right? Because we get indie games every day, every single day.
Yeah.
We get thousands of them. But the games that the majority of gamers, quote unquote, will play, the majority of gamers that will spend money on, the majority of games that are marketed by these huge publishers, we don't get much of those games. And so yeah, it's much harder for publishers to ask development studios, hey, could you take some time? Usually to cut a demo is a vertical slice of something like an E3 demo would take anywhere between 6 to 9 weeks. That is an entire season. That is like 3 months worth of work. Is essentially unnecessary. So if we could just avoid that as developers, we will.
Game trials. Hence the difference between a demo and a game trial again. Yeah. But yeah.
So, but yeah, the questions that I have for the game trial revolve around whether or not, is it going to be 2 hours? Is it going to actually be 2 hours? Is it going to be 2 hours at download? Is it going to be 2 hours? Like, let's say Horizon Forbidden West, right? Is it going to be 2 hours in the middle of the game where you get like a couple skills and then you get like a bunch of stuff that's removed to prevent spoilers? And then you get this little area that kind of really showcases everything that the game has to offer. But wouldn't that necessarily be false marketing if the first 5 hours were slow? Or would that be something along the lines of, would that reinvigorate the industry and push developers to create engaging gameplay moments in the first 2 hours to really sell their game? It would have to We would have to go back to the drawing board as developers and development studios to harness this new essentially game trial um time frame to use it as a marketing strategy in on itself. It's just something that there's a lot of things that are left out right now with the statements that are currently out. So I don't know the impact that it will have on the industry at large, and I don't know that the Sony development side of things will have any impact or any change. But who
Right.
knows?
Yeah. Great points, man. Forte, go ahead, man. I cut you off. I apologize, Forte. But go
Oh
ahead.
no,
Man.
you're good. That's why I love Deli. Deli's amazing. He makes it palatable for people to hear and understand what he's talking about.
He said paddle. I love that,
Yeah.
Forte.
Listen, man. No, I was one of those people that was like kind of like weary about this whole situation. I was like, man, it just don't make sense. But that's also why I didn't go on Twitter and start talking crap about it on day one, because
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. What did I say?
We got
What'd I
receipts,
say?
Forte. We got receipts.
Yeah, what I say? What I say? What'd
I don't know.
say?
I'm making stuff up, man. Go ahead.
I know you did, because I you know me, I keep my mouth shut unless
No, I do.
unless I know I got something to back me up. So when I was looking at it, I was like, man, this just doesn't make any sense. It's like demo trials. It's like, why are you getting trials or something that you could just download? Because when they first did the whole announcement, it was like game trials. I'm like, why do you need trials for something that you can just download in the service? And that made no sense. So I was like, okay, there's got to be something else to this. So the only saving grace for this, for me, and like you said, it's a feature because I do have both services already, so I'm going to get grandfathered into this. But for me, the biggest benefit is games that are not in the service. So if they're not in the service, you will have the ability to play those games and try those games out. That is actually a really, really good win. Now, do I think that should be tied to the highest tier for you to do it? No, because I feel like trials should be something that is inherently gifted to you for spending $500+ on a platform and then subscribing to their services in general just by buying. I mean, think about it. They give you the PlayStation collection just for having a PlayStation 5. They give you over 20 games just for having the PlayStation 5. So, being able to download and try out games like we did during the 360 days when it was just tied to, matter of fact, did you have to have Xbox Live to download like games, demos back on Xbox 360? I don't think so. You just download.
I don't believe so.
You just were able to download them and stuff. And this isn't comparing Xbox to PlayStation when it comes to that.
That's what you're doing, Forte.
No. I'm just saying, but that was just something when you think about demos and trials outside of EA, and the benefit of EA, and the reason nobody really had an issue with it is because you got to try it before the game came out. That was the main sticking point. Like, it wasn't the fact that, we get to play 10 hours of a game. No, you got to play 10 hours up to a week early. So people were jumping into the service because the benefit was the week early gameplay, not the trial itself. It was just jumping in and playing it before anybody else could.
Forte, why wasn't anyone Forte, why wasn't anyone raising the pitchforks and they have the torches out and saying, 10-day early access should be free?
Yeah, well, guess what? You know why? Because it's a third party, and nobody counts for third party. It's something that everybody gets. It's something that everybody gets, not just one particular platform. So you already know. I already knew where you were going with this. But yeah, that's.
I needed you to confirm this, Forte, because
I mean, I didn't even. I mean, it's simple. It's math.
He said it's math.
It's math. People go to the common denominator when it comes to the things that they care about, which is a piece of plastic. So they cap for that one thing, and they get upset when the other one doesn't have it. But let's be for real. Yeah. I was one of those people that felt like this was like a no-go. But I was like, as soon as I heard, and like I said, as soon as I heard yesterday that, there will be games that will have trials that aren't in the service, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I still don't feel like it's a thing that should be tied to your highest tier, but at least that is something that is palatable to the point that you can say, oh, do I want to do this? Is this something I should want, that I want to subscribe to? It's a tangible thing that you can say, oh, okay, this is a checkbox, I want to do this, versus just a trial that for a game that you could just download that's in a service already, which made no sense to me at all. But that's the biggest thing, man. Just always wait. If something doesn't make sense to you guys, and this is me talking to the chat, if it don't make sense to you, wait till it makes sense. You don't have to talk about any of this stuff until it's time for it to release. It's not going to release here in America until what, June?
June, yeah.
So
we have about another,
we still got a whole nother month
and a half.
I understand the talking points and stuff. We can all talk about, like, is it a good service? Do we really wish it was more of this? That could have been a conversation like, hey, the game trials, what do you think game trials should be? Do you think it's a benefit to be in the service at the highest tier? What would you like to see inside of that service at the highest tier?
Unlike what Destin was doing.
Well, Dustin, I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if you saw Destin.
Destin.
He got kind of hurt because Dusty. He got
who called him Dusty?
Who you think just called him?
Was that Deli?
Yeah, Deli over being messy. I mean, listen, he's
gonna block you, Deli.
Listen, he's DPS.
I hope I get blocked.
Listen, I think the biggest thing is people.
I think Game Logic actually blocked him.
Oh Lord!
Well, after he said his mess, after he got messy last night, I was like, I don't need to see that anymore. He's not a credible game journalist to me anymore.
But this is the funny thing. I think he got messy because he went in at MBG because MBG got real messy, and then he quote tweeted MBG on the mess that he was talking about.
Destin is a journalist. What is he doing?
Listen, why do you think that really matters?
Bro,
do you really think do you think that matters, bro? Listen, let me tell you something.
Go ahead,
I was in a party. Man will go unnamed because I love him. He's amazing. He's in the industry. A cool dude. But this dude is like the antithesis of something completely different when you talking to this dude outside of him being on IGN or any place like that. Yes, he works for IGN. But yeah, he's the complete opposite. Like, I was shocked. Utterly shocked.
Has he been on our show before?
No. But the biggest thing is these people are just people. They're people just like everybody else. Everybody tries to hold them to this higher standard. And I get that. I get it. Because that's kind of how it's always been. But we got to remember, this is 2022, and people have opinions outside of what their in your job.
Yes. I get it. You come here and you talk to us a certain kind of way, right? Every Wednesday night.
Yes.
Is that the same tone and interface that you use with your customers?
Let me ask you this. With my customer? Okay, let me. Okay.
In the sense of a challenge from a customer, would you feel restrained?
There is a difference there because he's not doing it inside of an IGN video. I can say all of these different things when you're right. When I'm at work, I don't say half the stuff. I'm just completely buttoned up, telling everybody what they need, helping everybody get the stuff they want. As much as I want to cut some of these people out because they ask the most asinine stuff, that's the most craziest stuff, I'm like, you know what? This is what you need. This is what you need to do. I'm very professional in that manner. But when we get on the podcast, I'm talking to my friends in Xbox Live and I'm talking to you guys, it's like, yo, what's up with this BS that's been going on and spewing across this freaking community, which isn't really a community when it comes to gaming. It's more of a cesspool of people that just want to talk junk about other people. That's literally what this is. But that's the thing I want people to kind of realize. Yes, you are right. When it comes to the IGN side of it, when they're talking to their subscribers, people that are on their website, when they're doing videos on the IGN proper website, you will never see any of the stuff that they're saying. But when they're on their personal YouTube channels, they're going to do what they want to do.
So my thing is, and I will be interested, I will join you. I feel like I am willing to make a $99 bet. And I usually tell the profanity on podcasts, but I give you a $99 bet almost, and I guarantee you Destin will be talking the same shit on Podcast Unlocked that he was talking today was very
No, you
little
would.
effort. And so my feeling is, and people are going to feel like it's unfair, but this is maybe kind of the mentality I have growing up as a Cold War kid. Certain people in certain jobs don't get to take the hat off, right? We talked about this a few months ago with like the CEO who said so like the system, and like I'm not trying to make a comment on the English principles. I'm simply saying, look, when you're in that role, you don't get to stop being the CEO just because you're on your private Twitter channel, right? When you are identifiable as being part of an organization or a corporation, and there's no way for you to obfuscate that, that's, in my opinion, it's your responsibility to maintain that demeanor. As painful as it is, as unfair as it is, that just comes with the job. And so my personal feeling is, again, it's not a statement that that IGN is like a high quality like journalistic outlet. However, they would say that they are. And so my feeling is that as a outlet, one of the biggest, if not one of the biggest two, right, on the scene, to me, there's an incumbency upon their staff to always present themselves with a certain degree of professionalism. And even at that, there's a pretty wide threshold of variance in that for Dustin to behave the way that he's behaving. But the way he's behaving now is like another generic, basic console warrior stirring the pot, saying a bunch of crap he doesn't need to say, and to me, he's diving down below that threshold. But I have an expectation of behavior.
Right.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, Forte. You make some great points. I mean, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but
that's the biggest thing. Go ahead.
But
no, I'm sorry.
I disagree with you in the sense that he is speaking to people who are
that are patriots of that website.
Yeah, and I'm being one of them. I frequent IGN, and while his viewpoints may not be the viewpoints of IGN, he's still a verifiable employee of IGN, right?
Right.
And hold on a sec here. I'm going to pull up his profile.
Yeah, pull it up. But the biggest thing I just want people to, and I don't like I said, this isn't me disagreeing with anything you guys are saying. I agree 100%. You should all, especially when it comes to, because there's, even though when I'm not at work, there's things I will never touch. Like, you ask me certain things about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm like, not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. Not happening here, because you don't want to put yourself in a compromised position when it comes to your job. But in his position, I'm just telling you, once he got a taste of being able to do what he's doing now, and IGN hasn't done anything to him, they're basically whitelisting everything he does. Because he can get away and say anything he wants, even if you guys don't agree with the fact that he is not showing the best of journalistic integrity when it comes to the stuff that he's talking about. IGN is co-signing it because they're not doing anything about it. You don't see him being hit across the hand or slapped across the wrist for anything that he says, because even though we probably would never know that happened because we're not privy to those conversations, but if it was happening, he wouldn't be doing it still. And he's in that YouTube channel with almost 90,000 subscribers on it. He's been doing that for well over a year and a half. He's been doing that on his channel. He's been doing that on Twitter. So the only reason I'm saying the man is going to say what he want to say and we can't be mad about that is because the company he works for is letting him do it. So if you're going to if you're going to basically say Destin is in the raw for stuff of what he's saying, then you got to say IGN is in the raw for allowing it to continue as much as it is.
I don't disagree. I mean, this goes back to my, and I have a hard disagreement of like I used to be a diehard listener to those podcasts, but like those podcasts, in my opinion, Podcast Beyond, Podcast Unlocked, they have just dived to low altitude that I feel like is beneath the standards that they used to previously be. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I just want to kind of say something. Like, Forte, I get what you're saying. Like, IGN's kind of like they're not.
They turned a blind eye to the whole situation.
But I will say this. I think the unfortunate thing is that he is also kind of feeding that narrative that hey, you know what? Because there's that negative that game journalists, the media, gaming medias, they're all biased. He's feeding that narrative, right? He's also potentially making it harder for others who don't. He got a little petty today, and again, you are a journalist. Don't get petty. And also be accurate in your reporting. You're making videos and you're saying demos, and that's not accurate. Like, be accurate. You're a professional. Like, that's my expectation. And it's like, be professional. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Well, the problem is that the media journalism is lacking the same rule set or standards that, like, I guess, is it terrible to say normal journalism? But like normal journalism.
But I would even say normal journalism is kind of lacking in some area. And
I mean, it is. Don't get me wrong. But
Fox
like,
News.
Well, that's a privatized media company. That's not journalism. But let's just say that, like, gaming journalism on its own is really lacking media literacy because there isn't a standard. To be frank with you, it's kind of like the Wild Wild West when it comes to, well, just the games industry in general, but like specifically games journalism is a wild West because it's just, well, I mean, it's lawless. There's no literacy, there's no standard there, AP and all of that stuff goes out the window. Like the who, why, what, when, where. Like, really the only credible journalist in right now to me is Schreier. But he works for Bloomberg. So, when he worked at IGN or when he worked at Kotaku or whatever, when he worked at X and Y company, he was kind of on the forefront of keeping that journalism standard alive because, well, he went to school for it and he has a reverence for that kind of stuff. But everybody else kind of seems to lack that kind of care, finesse, polish when it comes to like journalism, journalism as a whole, not just gaming journalism.
Yeah, and that's again, that's my point. Like, I feel like again, Destin is a professional. Carry yourself as such, and you are interacting with people that visit your site, your place of employment to get information. But you also can't, and I've seen him do this. You can't get upset when you throw that smoke out there and people punch back. And and cry, these guys are console warriors, because you are in a roundabout way actively participating in pushing certain narratives that console warriors do. And again, I'm gonna go back to the fact that he is shaming a company for participating or for implementing something he's actively participating in with his own channel. It's like, dude, like what are you doing? And again, it pushes that. Fortunately, it pushes a stereotype, if you will, and well, at least I think it's a stereotype that all gaming journalists are kind of poo, and I don't agree with that. I think there's some great gaming journalists out there. Deli, you mentioned Jason Schreier. I enjoyed Jason's content. I don't always agree with everything he says, but I don't have to. We had Jeff Grubb on last week. I enjoyed Jeff's content, and his colleague Mike, I always butcher his last name, Minotti, and I enjoy the work that I really enjoy the work that that Destin's colleague Ryan McCaffrey does. I mean, we've had Ryan. Yeah, we've had Ryan on BRAP twice. Ryan is great. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge. Presents himself that way. Puts out great content. And then there's other folks who provide, a different, more opinionated, content, that I enjoy listening to, like Colin and the folks at Sacred Symbols. So, but that stuff, like what he's doing and kind of, teetering on console warring, I just think it's ridiculous. And I think it makes me question his credibility as a journalist. And I never thought I'd ever say that, by the way. Because I've never been that critical of gaming journalists. Period. I just haven't.
No, it's understandable, man. I mean, when you go from what we had for so many years to now. And I remember when I first met you, when you think you jumped on Scubcast, and I think the first conversation that we had on that show was talking about gaming journalism and the bias and stuff. And you definitely been one of those people that's always been in the forefront of talking about, like, about being against saying that, journalists, are, they don't do that. That's not something that we need to be, trying to call out on a consistent basis. Because yeah, there might be some, but for the majority of them, we're not going to say the whole industry is like that. So I definitely agree when it comes to that. But you also got to think that a lot of these journalists are part of companies that are dying. IGN is dying. As much as they still get a bunch of views, a bunch of clicks, they're dying, and they're being taken over by people like, us when it comes to our shows, Dealer and Code and MBG and all of these other people, Spawn Wave Media, and them putting out their videos and talking about this stuff. They are more of a source for information than some of these larger publications. The only benefit these publications have at the moment is just access. Once YouTubers and like ILP and stuff with their website, once these entities start getting their foothold and they start getting that type of access, then you'll start seeing that disappear more and more when it comes to these higher end, gaming journalists and stuff. But they know they have to be able to find a way to compete with the onslaught that's happening from inside this community when it comes to just communication of knowledge and information. And that's why they allow their people to go out there and do the things and say the things that they do, because guess what? It drives people to their videos. It drives people to their website. It drives more engagement, because we always been a part of the narrative that, what's the name, sales, negative publicity. As much as people say there's no bad publicity, because there really isn't, but publicity gets more people to your website. Controversy gets people to your website and stuff. So that is also part of it, because they know they have to do something to combat what they're losing when it comes to a growing number of people switching over to other types of media. I used to be a huge fan of IGN. I used to watch every time they had a video or a review for something, I would watch it. I can't even tell you the last time I've been to that website ever. It's probably been 2-3 years.
And I agree. I mean, I can definitely see that there's causality behind, the reason Justin behaving the way that he behaves. I just, much like you say about many games and sometimes platforms, it is just not for me.
Right. Yeah.
Can I apologize? Can I go back and really quickly hit some points back on the Sony subscription?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Just real quick. So Dylan brought up one thing, and I was but today I've been thinking about that the plan to do on Game Pass could have an impact on kind of how devs go about designing. But one of those things, and one of those things that could also be unfortunate, or devs might look at as unfavorable, is if it's the wide open demo, which is basically like, hey, here's the game. If it's got multiple modes, you can decide which mode you want. And one of the things I caught to think about is I'm a person who puts a very big evaluative eye on onboarding. Like I do not like snail pace, like plotting onboarding. It tends to turn me off the games. And so, say whatever you say about, an Ubisoft game in the Division 2, the fact of the matter is that the Division 2 had one of the best onboardings that I've ever experienced. Like, you're in the game for like 30 seconds and then you're in a firefight, right? But then I look at something like Red Dead Redemption 2, and I despise the onboarding to Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, in those first 2 hours of the game.
It's painfully slow.
Yeah, it becomes a great game thereafter. But I'm like, okay, if I had been given time trials for games, I would have bought the Division 2, and I wouldn't have bought Red Dead Redemption 2. So that, that could kind of drive some behaviors. The second point I wanted to make was, we've seen Valve. It didn't make that optional, and it didn't make that a conversation with developers. So it was just basically, we're going to do this. You're licensing your agreement to us by putting your game in the store allows us to do this. We don't need to have a ton of conversation. But right now, all of a sudden, Bungie is like, hey, we'll agree to that. And so, it's not supported on the Steam Deck. I think I would agree with Deli, right? If this is just a thing that Sony's saying is going to happen and it's not a matter of conversation with its partners, that's a thing. The third thing I wanted to add is, the 2 hour thing and the thing I was calling it a thing. Just to go back to those refund policies, right? The Xbox policy, as far as I read it, isn't any better than Sony's policy. The only thing that makes it kind of anecdotal or subjectively better is that it says that it will deal with refund requests on a case by case basis, but it's also not, at least the Steam refund policy, which again, I also, you can get your money back from Steam. In my case, I was not able to get my money back from Steam. So it's not like Xbox says you can play the game for 2 hours and then you get a refund. It says that it will consider that basis, but also basically says once you start to download any more, egalitarian than the Sony policy. And the last thing I'll say is, fortunately, you mentioned that. The other thing I would have mentioned when I talk about the design is, like Deli said, this to drive developers to do more, to be incentivized to do more of it on Division 2 and get the, like, we may suddenly get a bunch of games that have like these 007 kind of movie openings, right, to onboard you into the game and get you ramped into the action right off the bat before they fall back to more of like the narrative. And then the last thing I'll say is, fortunately, you mentioned this thing about, this thing doesn't, in top game trials don't necessarily need to be at the highest tier. Part of my thought is, everything that on this topic that Sony is doing feels like to me it is in sync with Sony branding, right? I think they're kind of going down this path, kind of as these quality discussions and ladies' comments about a subscription service day and date not being the same. That Sony is going down with, and all the statements about wanting to maintain high quality. That Sony is going down this path, of kind of trying to brand themselves as like the gaming quality, right? And to not allow the notion of their reputation and their brand to be sullied by the fact that they're doing a subscription service. If that what's being the shame that's being thrown at Xbox is that inherently a subscription service means lower quality game, which is a take that I don't agree with. That is, a lot of the rhetoric that's going around. And so, to me, this notion of, it's highest, it's premium customers, right, who are going to buy in at the premium tier, get that enhancement, right, that allows them to test drive these games. And, I feel like their perspective towards the developers is, again, if I may have mentioned it before the show, but definitely what I mentioned today on Twitter is like, look, we're a high quality platform, we're a house of quality. If you want to be on our platform and you want to sell our game, you need to get comfortable with the notion of people getting a chance to go hands-on, and so you need to deliver quality. But if you're delivering quality, you shouldn't be bothered by us opening up your game to a time game trial.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, that's an interesting point, man. Well, I always said Sony, I think, is trying to position the PlayStation product as, in some ways, kind of a boutique luxury product, the way Apple does with its iPhones and its iPads and its products, right?
Like a luxury item,
Yeah. They certainly charge us for it, like in this.
That they do.
That's bad. That's a marketing tactic,
Yeah, that's a great point.
They do many of the same things that Apple does, driving the ecosystem, driving the customer base. Same marketing tactics, all announcement strategies, all of that kind of stuff. But it seems to be working for them because obviously they're a gaming company. PlayStation, anyways, is a gaming-centered division, whereas Xbox operates more like a tech company. So their rules don't necessarily apply to our industry in the same ways that Nintendo, Sega, Capcom, Square, and EA and everybody else operates.
Yeah, that's a great point, Deli. Well, look, gentlemen, I do want to go wrap up the show. And first, I just want to thank everyone in the live chat. Thanks for coming by and hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate it. Also want to thank our first-time guest, Deli. Deli, dude, we got to get you back on again, man. It was great having you on. Fellow member of the DMV, which is awesome, man. There's a lot of us, by the way, who podcast that are in the DMV, which is kind of cool.
It's kind of surprising, actually.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising. It really is. Like I've met a lot of people here that are in the DMV, and I'm like, wow, this is that's why I say hashtag DMV gaming. But Deli, yeah, but no, Deli, man, thanks again. Thanks for having you on, man. Really appreciate your insight into the industry. It's always fascinating to get that perspective because I feel like it's a perspective we don't get a lot on podcast, especially ones that are maybe that are non-media per se, or maybe not as large as some of the other podcasts. But thank you again for your time, man. And look, I don't know if you want to be found on the Twitters, but if you do, let everyone know where they can find you.
Oh yeah, I'm found on Twitter under twitter.com/agentdeli. Twitch is the same, and YouTube is the same way. Well, YouTube, I'm just Deli, obviously, but yeah, the best way to interact with me is on Twitter. So if you guys follow me on Twitter and just shoot me a bunch of questions, you're more than welcome to. Or I'm more than welcome to. You're more than welcome to. Oh my God, my words. Shoot them my way, and I will gladly answer them when I have free time, which is usually at 7:30 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning, and 12 o'clock. So yeah, thank you again. I'm Deli. I'm a former Ubisoft level designer, and now I currently work at Microsoft. And thank you, Brat, for having me on. And it's nice to be able to formally meet everybody, except for Forte. He's my best friend.
That's scary if Forte's your best friend.
Yeah,
I'm just joking. Forte's a good man. He's a good man.
Listen, Deli gets all the hearts. All the hearts.
No doubt, man. Game Logic, I thank you, man, for answering the call at the 11th hour. I know you don't want to be found, so I'll say thank you again, man.
Yeah, no need to ask me. I'm sure if somebody is actually interested in what I have to say, they can find me out there in the metaverse.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So, and then Forte.
Yo.
Hey, man, it's good to see you, man. It really is, Forte.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. If I didn't have to go to work today, I would have been here at 9 o'clock. But
Forte, you
calls.
Forte, you bring a lot of, I don't know, man, just smiles, man.
I bring that energy, man.
Yeah, no, you really do, man. You really do.
No, man, it was a good show. I was listening to y'all. I was at work, and I was cackling to myself. I was like, ha, ha. I said, "Oh, Deli's on the show." Oh man, I'm sorry, Deli. I'm supposed to be there with you, but no, man, it was a good show, man. Listening to you guys talk about it, and a lot of cool, interesting things that were brought up in the conversation that could definitely get people thinking. But yeah, for myself, Gaming Forte everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Xbox Live, PlayStation, DPS podcast on my channel tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come check it out. We got the new layout. We got the new intro that we're going to be debuting tomorrow. It looks fire. Your boy put it together all in one day. It was very grueling, very taxing, and I'm tired. But outside of that, man, just come through, have fun, chat it up with us, and definitely have a good time.
No doubt, man. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night, man. DPS.
You and me both. DPS. Damage per second, not deep, deep penetration.
I was
what?
okay,
I didn't even.
I don't even know where that came from.
Your mic cut out. Could you
yeah, I think
Forte, could you say that one more time for me?
No, I don't think we don't need to say that.
Listen, someone else said that, and shout out. Oh, you know what? Why we here? This is the first episode since the falling out, but I would like to thoroughly say thank you to our host Enrique, Mr. Brap, for going on Crossfire and not backing down. I appreciate you, sir.
I have no idea what you're talking about, man.
You gave me and the rest of the community an amazing weekend. I just want you to know that, sir. I just want you to know, bro. My weekend was great. Shout out to you. Shout out to Crossfire. Shout out to all you guys on there. Shout out to E Jack that didn't even know what to say while he was on the show because he was like stunned by all the stuff that two children were on the show yelling at each other. but it was a great time and I enjoyed myself. So shout out to you, Brad.
Look, man,
appreciate you,
there's a
bro.
lot of things I will tolerate, but I will not tolerate someone telling me to perform fellatio on a corporation.
Oh man, they were telling you to they were basically telling you to put the power cord of the PlayStation in.
I don't know that's where I draw the line, but
It was a great. It was sad, but it was great. It was entertaining. That's what this community likes, though. So I guess that's.
oh, let me tell you something, man. I got a lot. You're right. I got a lot of DMs and people were like, "Oh, that was great." I'm like, "What?"
It was, man. I was yelling in my mind saying, "Stop feeding him." But then I was like, "But this is too funny."
Is there
Oh, they're
a link to this kind of stuff?
Oh yes.
Just go-
Yes. I will link you. Go to anybody that wants to know. Go to 1 hour 37 minutes, and you will enjoy what I enjoyed.
Oh, I had people hit me up and ask me if I want to do spaces on it. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Oh no, man! Once you did it, it's like it's all gone, man.
No, but I will say this. You know,
somebody's typing. Somebody's typing.
Yeah. No, I will say that he did apologize to me after the show. Yeah. So no, I certainly appreciate that, and so there's no hard feelings or anything like that. Like I said, he did apologize. I accepted his apology, and we move on. So,
right.
But yeah. All right, no, everyone, have a great weekend, by the way, and just have fun playing video games, and we'll catch you all next week. So, actually, there might not be a BRAP next week. Now that I think about it, I may have some.
Oh.
I gotta check, see what my schedule is. There's a bunch of stuff going on next week, like soccer tournaments or something, or I don't know, talent show. There's something going on, the kids' school. So there may or may not be a BRAP. I don't know, but I'll let you all know. ASAP. So,
ASAP.
Yeah. So, all right, everyone, we're out. Have a great weekend. Catch DPS tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We're out. Peace.
Yes, sir. Peace.